introduce our next speaker, Ana Rodriguez, whose paper is titled Emotional Labor in Parental Relationships and its Effect on College Students' Mental Health. Like our last presenter, she worked with wonderful Dr. McCormick, who will come up after the presentation. But we'll let Ana say the rest. Nothing else I can add, and we'll have time for questions afterward.
Hello, as mentioned, my name is Ana Rodriguez, and my research that I did this summer is titled Emotional Labor in Parental Relationships and its Effects on College Students' Mental Health. So first I wanted to go over what exactly is emotional labor. Emotional labor was initially defined in 1983 by Arlie Hochschild, and when she initially defined this term, it was specific to the workplace, so specific to professional settings. The way she defined it in her book is a labor that requires one to induce or suppress feeling in order to sustain the outward countenance that produces a proper state of mind in others. So basically, from this, what she's trying to say is like the example of the amount of work that it takes in order to either suppress your own feelings or produce feelings that you might not really be feeling in order to have a desirable attitude. So a great example of this could be like a cashier at a grocery store. Maybe they're having a hard day, maybe they're going through things, but in order to have that demeanor that is expected of them to be friendly and courteous, they must put in work to suppress those feelings and act in a friendly manner. This is usually, when Arlie Hochschild described this, she described as it usually has to do with some company goal. So it could be like to drive up sales, or it could be to have customers come back, whatever the case may be. Recently, however, in the literature, it has shifted to specific to relationships. So instead of just in the workplace or with professional relationships, it could also be with personal relationships. A lot of the literature right now focuses on heterosexual romantic relationships, but I wanted to study on a different kind of relationship that there isn't much about, which is parental relationships. So I wanted to specifically study with college students, since being a college student myself and going to college, it is a population that is very easily accessible. And also I feel like college is a interesting time for many people. A lot of people are moving out of the house for the first time, or a lot of people are still living at home but now have an increased amount of autonomy, an increased amount of workload, whatever it is, they have increased responsibilities. And whatever the case is, it causes a change in the dynamic often with college students and their parents. So my specific research question was, what, if any, correlation can be found between emotional labor in parental relationships and mental health with college students? The way I decided to study this was by conducting a survey that consisted of 20 statements, 10 of which were created in order to assess the amount of emotional labor that one puts into their relationships with their parents or caregivers. So here are some examples. I feel responsible for my parental figure/caregiver's well-being. I put on a mask in order to display the emotions I get around my parent, and I feel I can honestly communicate or discuss my emotions and mental health with my parental figure/caregivers. As you can see, I then asked each participant to rate it on a scale of strongly agree to strongly disagree, so the Likert scale. And as you can see, there's a number tied to it, depending on how much emotional labor that would indicate. So for number 4, putting on a mask, someone who strongly agrees with that would indicate that they need to put more emotional labor in order to master their emotions. So that is a 3, and then so on and so on. And then for my second half of the statements, so as I said, the first 10 were about parental emotional labor, and the second half was taken from the DASS, which is Depression, Anxiety, Stress Scale. This was created back in 1995 by Lubibon and Lubibon, and it is still widely used today. So what I did was I took 2 statements from the depression, 2 statements for anxiety, 2 for stress, and then one of them was chosen at random. And as you can see, they were asked and rated in a similar way as the previous 10 ones. And for example, I have here in the past week, I tended to overreact to a situation. That's to assess for stress. In the past week, I felt I was close to panic, to assess for anxiety. And in the past week, I was unable to become enthusiastic about anything, to assess for depression. So then, here are my responses that I received. So 90 responses from college students averaging out at the age of 23. 57% were women, 32% identified as men, 6% non-binary, 2% other, and 3% chose the option that they prefer not to say. When it comes to race, I had 41% as Hispanic/Latinx, 38% identified as white, 2% Black or African American, 9% of mixed race, 6% Asian, 1% Native American, and 1% Arab or Middle Eastern, and 2% chose the option of other. So as I said before, there was a number tied to each one. So with depression, anxiety, and stress, and parental emotional labor, I was able to calculate a score for each participant for both responses. And once I ran the correlational analysis, this is the graph that I came up with. And then I had a R value of 0.503, and then a p-value of less than 0.001. So what does this tell us? Well, as we can see, the p-value of less than 0.001 tells us that this is a statistically significant correlation, meaning that the fact that these two values have this correlation is not likely due to pure chance, but there is something there. And as we can see by the positive trend, it is the upward trend, it is a positive correlation, meaning that for participants who had a higher amount of emotional labor invested in their parental relationships, they also had a higher score in the depression, anxiety, and stress scale. Our R value of 0.503 tells us that this is moderately strong. However, as I kept receiving more responses through the fall and I kept rerunning the analysis, that number kept getting higher. So I believe that this is a very strong correlation between these two variables. And this answers my initial research question, which was what if any correlation can be found. We can see that in fact there is a correlation which is a statistically significant, positive, moderately strong correlation. So here are just some interesting things that I saw, some interesting things when it came to questions. For the demographic, for the statement of I resist expressing my true feelings when talking to my parents or caregivers, I saw that 58.6% of male identifying participants shows that they either agree or strongly agree with this statement, which was unique because for most of the other gender identities, it was more that disagreed or more evenly distributed. And the same thing was true for males in other questions. It was more even. This is one of the only ones where it was like so positively skewed. And then what are our conclusions and implications? Well, this study tells us that parental relationships continue to follow us and affect us as we grow. So as I said, many students are no longer living at home, but as we can see that relationship that they continue to have with their parents continue to affect their mental health. I think this is important for mental health practitioners to know, specifically those who work with either parents of college students or college students themselves. It is important to keep in mind just how many different aspects can affect a student's life other than workload and personal things that are going on with their parental relationship, and that emotional labor is also important. And this is important for students and parents to know. As a student, it's important to know all the different aspects and factors of life that can affect your mental health. And the emotional labor is a very interesting and important one. And then for future research, I would like to do research in which I could determine the causation. As I said, my study was a correlational study. So all I can say for sure is that these two factors are positively correlated. However, I can't for sure claim that cause and effect unless I were to run something, a deeper analysis or something with a experimental design. It would also be interesting to do a larger and more diverse sample. So for my sample, it was only 90 for the summer, so this is relatively small, and it was all taken from one college, so they all have a lot of similarities. It would be interesting to have a diverse sample, maybe from other parts of the state or anything like that. And I would also like to dive deeper into the demographics. So as I said, there were some questions where I saw differences between gender or differences between race. and it would be interesting to learn more deep analysis on that. Hopefully I can do that through my paper, but yeah. I like to, as I said, most of the study was ran during the summer, so the Beginner Scholarship Program funded that, so I was acknowledging them, all the staff, and then my mentor, Dr. McCormick, he was the one who presented the idea of emotional labor to me and also helped me throughout this whole study. My cohort and friends and family.
Thank you so much, Anna. That was fascinating, incredibly well presented. Are there questions from the audience? Can I ask her? I'll ask the first question then. Having done this, do you have recommendations to St. Edward's or to the audience members of us who work here, who are professors here? Like, what do you think are action steps that we could take to better support our students having done this research?
I think just presenting the idea of emotional labor is extremely helpful because I feel like it's something that we know we do, but we might not have analyzed or thought deeply about. Like everyone knows about how we manage our emotions, but having that label and learning more about it is very interesting, and just being able to assess yourself and being like, oh, like I'm putting a lot of emotional labor into this relationship. It might be good to have a talk, or maybe be good to be aware of it.
Thank you. Any questions, Ronnie?
Can I ask one off? To kind of piggyback off that one question there. What about for, let's say I'm a student, I'm 18, 19, 20 years old, and I'm starting to realize some things about myself, and I'm starting to realize that, hey, I have carried a lot of emotional weight, a lot of emotional labor in my family, and I'm starting to recognize some of the effects of that, or maybe I want to change that a little bit. Any advice that you would have, given how much you know about this topic?
Yeah, I think the first step, at least in my opinion, would be to have a talk with whoever you have that relationship with, so if it's your parents or whoever it is, just be like, hey, like I see that I am doing this a lot. I was wondering if there was anything we could do to maybe work on this, or maybe just putting in a lot of like self-care. I think self-regulation and being able to know like, hey, like maybe I just don't want to no longer suppress my emotions with talking to this person, so maybe let's try to have a talk about it or something like that. I feel like that's like the first step, and then after that, it might be good to seek some further help and knowledge.
Thank you so much. I'd like to invite Dr. McCormick up, and he'll present your cord and stole that you'll wear in recognition of this work, but also all of your fabulous work in the honors program. Congratulations.
So when Anna proposed this, she said I helped her come up with this idea. I did not. She came up with this idea. I may have just asked some questions. I was one of those ones, and I know Dr. Book, you probably can relate to this when you supervise students, where you think that is the best research question you could ask. I can't believe somebody else hasn't already asked this question. So just such a remarkable study, and you did such an amazing job. I had 90 participants, and I think now we're up to 115, 120 or something. You've just been so steadfast and so committed, and so it's just been an honor to work with you. My favorite thing to say about a student is Anna's going to go be a social worker. in the fall, she'll be going probably to UT, maybe somewhere on the East Coast, to get her LMS study and her clinical license, and then go on to her PhD. So I'm so excited to have you a part of that. That community is what it's up. That's it. This, I'll give you that.